All right, welcome. So, are you struggling with the effects of trauma or addiction? And if so, then you're in the right place. Thank you, Todd, for joining us. Today, I'm interviewing Todd McLaughlin from Native Yoga Center in Florida. And we're going to be discussing how Ashtanga Yoga can help with healing from trauma and addiction. My name is Mandi Gardner. I'm the founder of Holistic Evolution Shala. I'm an Ashtanga Yoga teacher as well as a DBT skills coach. How has Ashtanga Yoga impacted your life personally? And have you experienced its healing power in your own journey?
Yes, it has impacted me immensely in my journey. The most important thing, I would say, probably breathing. I think that's the one thing, nervous system regulation. And I think prior to long-term yoga practice, obviously at the beginning of yoga practice, something grabs us. Some part of it is attractive and something pretty quick usually says, I felt like this is good for me. So I think like innately or deep down, I was like, I love this. I feel really good after. So I think that probably attracted me. Definitely the element of moving and exercising and the sweat and the challenge of the positions and the coordinations of the vinyasas, the movements from one pose to the next, I think gave me so much information to work with. The breathing part, I probably put that more secondary, and I was more fanatical about the asana element. And I'd say probably that's been the biggest shift, like a full 180 flip from now I really just focus on my breath, try to focus on my breath, and let the movement be almost, I let the breath almost be the horse pulling the cart and the cart be the asana. I know there's this idea of synchronicity that you can't tell which one is pulling the other. Sometimes
Mm.
vinyasa can be described as breath movement synchronicity, and we can try to coach students that, okay, you're going to inhale when you lift your arms up, try to have your hands touch together right when you're at the end of your in breath, so that you can't really tell if the breath is leading the body or the body is leading the breath. But now I've been putting a little more emphasis on the breathing and even consciously thinking, I'm going to follow my breath. I'm going to actually put the breath first and let it pull the body along. And that for me has been, I think, probably the best part. When I look on the whole of how yoga has impacted my life and what element is really making a big difference. Because when I woke up this morning, I thought, okay, today I'm not looking at any news. I'm going to take a break. I can feel my nervous system getting dysregulated. And of course, I see my neighbor, he's walking his dog, and I'm like, well, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. And of course, it went there. And I'm like, I haven't even made it like 10 minutes out the door, and it's already intense. I feel my body now. So I'm way more in touch with how I'm actually feeling. Now I'm able to look back on my past and recognize that I did experience trauma. For a long time, I looked back on my life and I did not acknowledge that I did. I just didn't even
Mm.
give myself the space to acknowledge that I went through some difficult situations. And I know everybody does. I know there's a huge scale here. I'm of the
Mhm.
theory that everybody's experienced trauma personally. Some of it's just a little more impactful than others. So I say all that because once I started to even get in touch with the fact of recognizing how I'm feeling and getting truthful about that, and then realizing that with breathing, I can control that a little bit. All right, at least I feel like it's empowered me to feel like I have a little bit of a say in if I'm going to let this drag me down the street or am I going to pull it along behind me type of thing. So I would say that's probably been the biggest takeaway for me with my Ashtanga yoga practice. And if you had, when you as a teacher told me, Todd, chill out on the asana part, you're working way too hard. Relax, start to breathe. And I wouldn't have wanted to hear it. I just
Right.
wanted to learn second series and third series. And I was just like, go, I got to learn more. I got to learn more. And I got to go further and deeper. So it wasn't until a couple of years ago where I started feeling some serious pain. Very specifically, I ended up rupturing my disc in between my L5 and S1. So I have a spondylolisthesis where my L5 is slipped forward. I used to love backbending. I loved getting pulled into Kapotasana, which is the one in second series where you go backward like a camel, but you take your arms all the way above your head and you grab your heels. I used to love the Urdhva Dhanurasanas and have somebody grab my hands and pull them in on my legs and try to walk them up. So I was like, got a lot of, I don't want to say I got a lot of attention, but when you can do some really cool asana tricks, your ego kind of gets flared up because you think, wow, aren't I cool? I can do these really neat tricks, right? But
Right.
then when the pain starts to kick in,
Injury teaches
and
you.
then another lesson, and that's where I think the breath, like the whole time, the breath was just staring me in the face, but I just didn't quite get it. So I think the beautiful thing about the pain component is helping me to change the way that I approach and redirect, still be in love with Ashtanga, but give
Mhm.
myself the space to approach it from a slightly different angle. So
Yeah.
that's probably, for me, that's been one of the big takeaways over the years.
I think that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Well,
I can completely resonate with that. We
yeah.
get older, we have injuries, we have these things that come up, and we have to remind ourselves that it's not about getting the handstand or getting the crazy posture. Allowing ourselves to let go of the ego and connecting to the breath is always that thing
Yes,
that's always with us.
agreed.
All right, well, let's move on. In your experience, what makes Ashtanga yoga really effective for people who are healing from trauma and then also addiction?
Coming at it from the angle from experiencing trauma, and if we analyze what actually happens when we experience trauma, usually some lack of safety comes in. Like something is violated. So on some level, we feel violated, and there's not like a safe place to go. Sometimes when it's long term, we live in that state of constant fear that there's not a safe place to be to where you can actually relax. So from that angle, what I think is really brilliant about Ashtanga, which I know this might not be for everyone, because having opportunity to work with people with different backgrounds and experiences, it's not like the one size fits all thing. But the fact that there is a system or there's a sequence that is determined by the supposed guru. And so what I think is really cool about that is that now there's like a routine that my mind could rest knowing what I was about to walk into and what I was about to do. Because sometimes when we're a little bit scattered, not knowing if we're in a safe place or not, the sequencing to me felt safe. It felt like
Mm-hmm.
just the fact that I knew what was coming next and I could learn a routine that had consistency. And I feel like that consistency and being able to show up every day and repeat it gave me this feeling of, now I know like in Buddhist philosophy and or yoga philosophy, there's this idea that the world is constantly changing, and part of the reason we suffer is because we're attached to things not wanting to change. So I'm aware that probably a deeper aspect of yoga and meditation philosophy would be starting to try to be okay with understanding things are changing. But I think when we're healing, having some solid foundation to rest on is really important, just to give us a moment or a year or a month or however long of consistency. And then from that consistency, then we can start to learn nervous system regulation, breath control awareness, which is really where the real power comes in. That would be my answer, because I think that consistency is one of the key things. And then I can't speak, I guess if I analyze myself from the addiction side, that's a trickier one, because I do have an addictive personality and I'm aware of where I can get a little crazy. So I think also having that consistent element really just gave me a mirror to then get okay, this is what's going on. I can see myself now. So if someone comes to your class or my class and they have had a traumatizing event and they say, Ashtanga just riles me up, or it just doesn't, like, I don't like it. I would still say, okay, let's find a method of yoga or a way of approaching it that is a little bit softer, but still bringing the consistency piece in. If I use music or don't use music, I keep that consistent in the room. Even interesting things like wearing a similar outfit on a regular basis to create consistency in the room. I think
Mhm.
putting attention on what can we do to create an environment where you walk in and you know what's about to occur. And doesn't mean you really know it's going to occur. I think that's played a really critical role personally.
That was a perfect answer. I really agree. The set sequence has really offered so much grounding to my nervous system. And then what it's also helped me personally, and I do have a history of trauma. So I've experienced the symptoms of complex PTSD. And having a sequence where I was required to memorize it was totally new. It kept my mind busy on, okay, what am I doing next? So we're doing Surya Namaskara, and then, okay, now we're doing Padangusthasana. So it kept my mind very focused on what I'm doing. I'm breathing, I'm looking. And then as I really began to memorize it, then it became a really beautiful, like moving meditation, because I had this muscle memory that began to develop. And so then the meditation piece was even richer. So for me, it was such a different experience with the mind in a Mysore room than it was in a traditional class. When I'm in a traditional led class and I'm listening to the teacher, it was very often I would get very distracted and thinking about whatever. And then I'm like, wait, what are we doing? And then looking and trying to
Yes.
see and listen to the teacher. So I'm like lost and not in my, and like lost in my head. Therefore, it wasn't until I started to really have to memorize it and take personal accountability for the sequence that really clicked. Like,
Yes.
oh, this is
Yeah.
different. Yeah, I
The light bulb
agree.
keeps going off, right? Like you probably had a
Yeah,
light bulb moment this morning already.
wonderful. I hope everyone that was watching and listening got value. So.